Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. There's a cat behind me, as evidenced by the snake tail, if you're watching live. So, this week, I, of course, am joined, as usual, by my wonderful co-host, Jim Pliafco.
Hi, guys, and welcome everybody to the podcast.
Will Lindis.
Hey, guys and gals, welcome back.
And, of course, Poe, who will not get down. Get down, Poe. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
And now her feet are tangled in my headphones. Oh, goodness gracious. And now Jim has Akira. We've really become the crazy cat guys of Tucson.
It's crazy. I'm sitting here watching and just like altering videos, just Brad and Jim just getting assaulted by cats.
You know what it is? We just spent 6 days in delightfully sunny Palm Springs, and now that we're back, I think they are just very happy we're home. So they've kind of been all over us.
Yeah. Aww, that's adorbs.
They're not letting us forget that we abandoned them for 5 days. So,
as Kira drinks out of your water.
It's not even water.
Oh, that's right. Let's hope she likes Diet Coke.
She's like, what the fuck is this?
Oh goodness! Oh goodness! Oh goodness! Well, welcome to this week's show, guys. It's kind of a doozy. This week we are going to be discussing the big old dollop / slew of new films announced by Marvel, and we will also be reviewing the new Nightcrawler film. Don't get too excited, Marvel fans. It's not Nightcrawler a la, our favorite teleporting bamfing mutant. It's actually a sleazy nighttime news video freelancer, Jake Gyllenhaal, which actually is kind of awesome.
So the X-Men, is that Marvel?
It is, yes. It is. Yeah, it's Marvel Comics, but Fox has the movie rights.
Right. So right.
Yeah,
this is not the Marvel superhero Nightcrawler version.
No. Although it does make for a very cool, loosely connected theme for today's show, huh?
Yeah. I agree.
Being in multiple places as quickly as you can be.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, we are going to kick things off by talking about all the new Marvel films that have been announced. Will, do you want to take point on that discussion since you're our resident Marvel nerd?
Absolutely. Very proud to take point on that as resident Marvel nerd. I guess the place to start here would be with the kind of framing things. Marvel has been rolling out. Marvel's been rolling out its films in phases, and we're coming up at the end of Phase 2. We've had Guardians of the Galaxy, and we've had the Iron Man 3, Thor 2. All of these have been part of this phase, and the Ant-Man movie that's coming up is the last film announced for Phase 2. We've already known about that. It's been on the roster. So this last Tuesday, October 28th, Marvel got together with some of its shareholders and had a meeting, and during which they live blogged the whole thing, and they announced the entire Phase 3 plan, which brings the film schedule from what we already knew, announced through mid-2015, all the way through 2019. There's a lot of films here, a lot of actors on board, a lot of actors who are still in the speculation stage. So there's a lot of superheroes in our future. I think the obvious place to start this one out would be the first of the films announced, which is Captain America Civil War. This one's slated for May 6th, 2016. And the idea behind this one is it's going to pit basically Tony Stark versus Captain America. At this live blog, they had the two actors, Robert Downey Jr. And Chris Evans, come out on stage, and they did the little boxing pose and kind of hammed it up. So this one's really going to get to see the deterioration of the Avengers as the team as they face different ideologies as to what a superhero is and should be. I'm excited about this one because it mirrors a comic book storyline that really brought some real-world implications to the forefront of the very fictionalized world, and it looks like it's going to start splintering this giant world that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has built up, and let us maybe see some other things in there as well. So before I go on with any of the others, Brad, Jim, what are your thoughts on what we've heard about the new Captain America film?
I'm excited. I'm super patriotic. As you can see, I voted today. It is Election Tuesday at the time of this.
You and everybody on my Facebook feed.
I
Congratulations.
know, right? I am solely unique, exercising my right to vote here in the United States, right? Captain America 2 was kind of so-so for me. So going into a third film, I'm interested. Definitely, Iron Man is involved, and I don't think an Iron Man 4 has been announced, right? So
that's correct. We don't have anything else for Robert Downey Jr. except for anything that he might do with the Avengers and with this film itself.
Yeah.
So he can go back to making movies again, maybe. Anyway, but so I'm going to be the one, obviously, to ask the dumb question, since I am not steeped in the Marvel universe, other than the movies that I've seen up to now, which has been, all the Iron Man movies and the 2 Captain America movies, which I actually kind of like Captain America out of all the Marvel movies that I've seen. Didn't like the last one as much as the first one, but as an entity, I kind of like the Captain America story because. I just like the sensibilities that he brings. So at the point that we get this Captain America Civil War, we will have had just the 2 Captain America movies at that point.
That's correct. Yeah, the only thing that we'll have seen
and the 2 Avengers movies.
That's right. Yes.
So
right.
no other. Okay, gotcha. All right. So we won't get any other movies between now and then that create any kind of friction between Captain America and Iron Man. So it's all self-contained in this one Civil War movie?
Well, it might be, but I would go out on a limb and say, when we talk about film trilogies, we usually think about what? The second one is the dark one. The second one is the sad one, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're about to go into the second Avengers movie.
That's right.
Age of Ultron. So I would imagine, this is pure speculation. I don't know for a fact. It looks like it's going to deviate very, very different, from what they do with Ultron in the comics. I have a feeling, though, at the end of that, they're going to have to make some decisions that are going to start splintering them, which will set the stage for what happens in Civil War.
So I'll be on the lookout for something weird to happen that kind of split the Avengers, at least between Iron Man and Captain America, that sets up the Civil War.
That sounds right, yeah. Maybe even the events of that film, causing things to happen with, the government wants to do this or do that, right. And both of them taking different stances, like, I side with this, I side with that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
at least we know those 2 will likely survive the next Avengers movie.
Oh yeah, I mean that's pretty well locked down. What'll be interesting is it's as much as those 2 are the figureheads of this, we've got this whole other roster of people. Not only the ones that are actually in the Avengers movie, plus the new characters that they're introducing for the Avengers movie, but we've got Ant-Man who will be introduced by then. We should also see a film we'll talk about here in a moment. Black Panther is going to get his first appearance in the Captain America movie. So you're going to start seeing all of these other characters. Again, this is my hunch, but we're going to start to see them taking sides as well. So it's not just going to be 1 versus 1. You're probably going to see hints, and you're probably going to see Scarlett Johansson show up in this one, and she's going to be on one side or the other, or something like that.
Mm. And let's not forget, Nick Fury. I'm sure he'll be back.
Depending on how things go, yeah.
Depending on if he gets killed again or not.
Could be. Could be.
So what else have we got for movies?
Yeah,
I know there were a ton of them announced.
Yeah, so the next one I think of note is Doctor Strange. We now have a date confirmed for this one, November 4th, 2016. And while we don't have anyone cast in the lead yet, we have someone heavily rumored, pretty much all but, he's kind of in the all but confirmed stage, so anything could still happen, and that's Benedict Cumberbatch.
Smaug.
No, don't take Sherlock.
I think this is a good use for him. he's the type of guy, and maybe I'll be crucified for this. I don't know. I feel like of the works that we've seen so far, and again, this is we're recording this having not yet seen the Alan Turing movie that he's got that's coming out later this year. But he's played kind of a lot of these kind of like quirkier roles, and I think that Doctor Strange is a character that is very well suited to that affectation, that style that he brings to Sherlock. So I'm kind of excited to see him in this.
Is that a standalone entity? Will that also get tied in directly, like to anything before it, you think, or after it, like Avengers or Guardians, or
It's all part of this Marvel universe, right? It's all part of this
Marvel
universe.
So like umbrella, but
it's probably going to connect in some way, shape, or form. I imagine that this one is. I mean, Doctor Strange is. He deals with a lot of magic, which is a totally different area from what we're used to seeing in the cinematic universe so far. So who's to say? We may see some characters popping up. Certainly, I would say any of the events of the other films will certainly impact where he's at. But I don't necessarily know that you're going to see a bunch of cameos here.
Yeah.
If there's any, I might be interested to see if, and it totally depends on what Age of Ultron gives us. Scarlet Witch is a character who is both a superpowered character and she also becomes a magic user in the comics. I'll be interested in seeing if she shows up doing stuff with Doctor Strange or not. That could totally go either way. Couple other announcements. Black Panther, I think, is probably the one that has me most excited. That one's coming out November 3rd, 2017. This is again, I mentioned it briefly before, but this character will be appearing in the Captain America Civil War, and apparently, from what they've announced, sort of a major role before having his own solo film. This is
so question.
What?
Who exactly is Black Panther? Is he okay? This is totally probably a bad question, but is it related to like the Black Panthers? Like, is it like a historical Marvel tie-in thing? Like, what is Black Panther?
So Black Panther is actually a character that's been around for a long time. He actually predates the Black Panther Party by, I believe, 3 months. So I mean, he's a character from the '60s, and yeah, the first the forming of that, I believe, was something like 3 months later. He's notable for a few reasons. He is one of the I believe he is the first powered black superhero in comics. Before you had comics that would feature kind of African Americans in like kind of action roles, but this was kind of the first big superhero. He's been one of those characters who's played an important role in the Marvel universe in the comics for quite a while. He does so in a way that is. He doesn't fall into a lot of he doesn't fall into all of the same stereotypes that you might expect from this type of character. He's the king of a very wealthy African country that has kept itself secluded for years and years and years, and has a valuable element that it guards, and that valuable element kind of brings it into the global scene. So I'll be interested in seeing kind of which of those elements they use and which they don't. But I do like the idea of this character being here. He's interesting. I think it really adds to the diversity of the movie roster, which we haven't seen a whole heck of a lot of, especially from like the lead characters. And I'm also excited. The casting, they went with a guy who I'm not going to say is an unknown. This is a guy, Chadwick Boseman has played. He had starring roles in both 42 and
Get On Up.
Get On Up, the James Brown biopic. But he's not a household name. He's the type of person that a lot of people aren't necessarily, his name alone isn't a draw. So I think it's another feather in Marvel's cap saying, hey, we're going to take a chance on this guy, making him a starring character in our universe.
And I mean, that's in mid-2017, right? And there's 2 other movies that we barely touched on that are also that year.
That's right. I kind of glossed them a little bit, but we have Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which is due out May 5th, 2017.
Yay!
And I'm stoked about that. And Thor Ragnarok, July 28th, 2017. And while not a whole lot has been announced about that, we do know that both Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston will be back in their Thor and Loki roles, respectively.
So, okay, so question, right? Because Captain America 3 is the last Captain America film I've been reading.
Right.
Is this going to be the last Thor film as well?
It might be like some of the thing, I mean, Ragnarok has these kind of apocalyptic implications to begin with, and within the Thor comics itself, Ragnarok is both an event of kind of like death and rebirth, and it's also a weird robot Thor character that is created named Ragnarok. So I don't know which angle they're going with, if it's going to be like robot Thor, if it's going to be like an end of things. I'm guessing probably the first. So that you can kind of keep with that the more mythic fantasy type feel that world's been playing with. I don't know as much about Thor as a character. He's the type of guy who I enjoy. I enjoy reading more about Loki than I do about Thor when it comes comic book time. So this one's going to take me a bit of a surprise when it hits the screen.
Yeah, I mean they seem to do these things in threes, right? In trilogies. So they did it with Iron Man. I think they're going to do it with Captain America, or no?
I think so, yeah.
And it sounds like they're setting up to do it with Thor as well. But Hulk's getting no love, apparently.
Hulk's getting no love, but I have a feeling we'll be seeing him in one of these other ones. If I had to put my money on something, just kind of based on interesting storylines from the comic books and just cool places they could use them, I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up in Guardians of the Galaxy. That if I'm going out on a limb and putting my money anywhere, I would say Hulk is going to show up in Guardians of the Galaxy.
So is Star-Lord going to like come back to Earth and Bruce Banner is going to hitch a ride, like to get away for vacation? I mean,
one of the most interesting and probably popular Hulk stories from the comic books from the last few decades has been this thing called Planet Hulk, where Hulk basically holds onto a rocket and isn't able to get free of it, and it's launched out into space, lands on this planet, and kind of through gladiatorial combat and uprising becomes this this powerful figure there.
Which you might even see him in Interstellar if you look close enough.
I'll be keeping an eye out for that.
On a rocket going by the black hole.
I got my tickets for my 70mm for Interstellar already, son.
He's all like, Hulk flies slowly.
We just do one movie of just him very slowly. I want to see him like Doctor Strange loving into something. Couple other films of note. Captain Marvel is coming out in 2018, July 6th specifically. This is the other one that really has me stoked. Black Panther and Captain Marvel are the two. This is the first female-led Marvel movie. We've had females in the Marvel Universe, although not a whole bunch of them. And so this is the first one where a female gets to take the lead. Captain Marvel is an interesting character. Not only is she the titular character, Captain Marvel, but she's also a character who has been promoted up to that position. She used to be Ms. Marvel before. Marvel's put her in that position. They didn't want to have like a Marvel girl or She Marvel or something like that was very gender specific. They wanted to be able to put a female in a leading role in a kind of an equal type position to like a male character. No one has been cast for this, and honestly, on the internet right now, man, speculation is going crazy as to who the internet wants in this role. I think the popular vote right now, if the internet had its way, would be Katie Sackhoff, and I can't say I disagree with that position.
See, I get so confused with this whole Captain Marvel thing because, Captain Marvel was. Shazam was the original Captain Marvel in the Fawcett comics back in the 50s, right? Right. And then that comic stopped production for a few years. And I guess they never trademarked the name, so Marvel trademarked the name. But then Captain Marvel came back with, under DC a few years later. Yeah. And so it's this like giant clusterfuck, and people are super, super confused. And they're like, Shazam's going to be a girl? But wait, I thought that was DC. So it's really confusing.
Even more confusing is the fact that not only do we have that, and in the comics right now, Captain Marvel, the Shazam, the DC character, he's not allowed to go by Captain Marvel because of the way things are set up right now. That's why you just see him in his book called Shazam. But the Carol Danvers character has one of the most convoluted backstories. one that is tied to a lot of things that aren't really happening in the Marvel Universe. So I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if her movie is the one that diverges the most from the the comic book origins, and I'm cool with that. Like, they're gonna have to steep her character a little bit more in kind of what's currently going on in the Marvel movies.
Well, I mean, Will, speculate for me a little bit. Why do you think they decided to do a Captain Marvel movie at all?
Speculation is there's going to be a couple things. One, there has been some backlash about not having as much diversity. Like the first Avengers movie, when you saw the poster, all of the males are standing there all flexed, and then Scarlett Johansson's ass, as she's looking over her shoulder, is and that became that became Tumblr bait for the longest time, just because of the the difference between the males and the females on that poster. So I would imagine that's part of it. The script for this has actually been kicking around for a while, and I think it's probably a fail on Marvel's part that they didn't just go ahead and announce it before DC announced the Wonder Woman movie, because DC gets to claim to be the first, hey, we've got a female-led superhero movie on deck. They beat Marvel to that punch. The character herself is one of the front runners in the Marvel universe. Like, she is one of the big people, the power hitters, the character. She's got her own book right now. She's kind of front and center in the team book. So she's definitely an entity in the comic books, but that doesn't always translate over into general recognition. So it's another one that I think is a little bit risky. But of the different female characters, I think that this was the one that. She also has ties to the Kree, which is an alien race in the Marvel Universe, which ties in a lot with what's going on certain Marvel-themed television shows, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., plus some of the more interstellar stuff. We got to see some Kree in Guardians of the Galaxy and such. So I think she's the character that they're going to be able to retrofit in with what they've got the best, just by changing a few things.
Because there was some speculation that I've overheard about, doing a Black Widow, movie or something like that, because she's already got a part in the Avengers, and it's just curious to an outsider what the reasons were for them going in the Captain Marvel direction as opposed to, the Black Widow standalone movie or trilogy,
right?
Where they've already established that.
Especially surprising because Scarlett Johansson was one of the, love it or hate it, Lucy drew people to the box offices. It made good money, and that was based on Scarlett Johansson as a headliner. And you don't have that a lot, female action stars who have the same appeal and draw as males. So I would love to have seen a Black Widow movie. I think a really cool spy flick. Very, very, stealthy, sneaking around, stuff like that would have been a lot of fun to have seen here.
I agree, but we're not getting it, so.
But we are getting a two-part Avengers movie, May 2018 and May 2019, Avengers Infinity War. This is the third part of the Avengers trilogy, but they're splitting it into two halves because, hey, it worked for Harry Potter, it worked for Twilight, and it's working for Hunger Games. Might as well make it work here as well, right? We don't know a whole lot about this except for it's the Infinity War, which is one of the bigger known events in the Marvel Comics universe, and I've heard some buzz that we're probably going to see almost an entirely different roster of Avengers by the time that movie comes around than what we're seeing right now. So maybe a lot of these events that are happening in this Civil War are going to shake up, this and all of Phase 3 are going to shake up the team so much that by the time we get to those movies, it's completely unrecognizable.
I mean, where do you go after an Infinity War? Where can you go after that? Seriously, you can't. There's Civil War, that's fine, but then there's World War, then there's,
The Infinity War, yeah. Where do you go
Infinity from War, yeah. They should have probably just gone to Galaxy War or something. That way,
just move up in
Infinity for Phase 4 or something,
Yeah, local, solar system war, the builders stuff. Yeah. The only other film that we've got on deck after that, and this is the last in the list, is Inhumans, which is the weirdest one for them to have picked. Short buzz about the Inhumans, because I'm probably saying Inhumans right now, and both of you are like, "What the hell is an Inhuman? I don't know what these are."
I have no
It
idea.
sounds to me, without knowing anything, it sounds to me like Guardians of the Galaxy again with different characters.
I mean, in terms of taking a risk, yes, because it's super risky. The Inhumans have been around in the comics for a while. They're a bunch of people who, once upon a time, the Kree came to Earth, and they did some experiments on people, and now we've got this bloodline of people that have this Kree DNA, and they're the Inhumans. And when they're exposed to this special mist, they transform and they get powers. Their claim to fame is that they kind of follow a similar line to the mutants in the Marvel Universe, which is they're the hated and feared and hunted, and we don't like those people group. And since Fox owns mutants and is going to hold on to them because Days of Future Past did extremely well, it looks like Marvel wants to kind of reclaim that hated and feared type of characters, and Inhumans it is. And you've even seen, like, within the last couple of years, the Inhumans have always been around, but there's really just been a few of them. They're a royal family. They're just kind of characters that showed up from time to time and were just sort of in things. And the last few years, Marvel has made a huge push with them in the comic books. So I think that, like, those super tied into the world of comics aren't going to be super surprised to see this movie. I think not even casual fans, even people that know comics are probably still going to be like, who the hell are those guys, or why should I care? But I think it's risky, I think in a good way. I'm excited to see it. I'm hoping it doesn't flop. I'm hoping they're not trying... My only fear with it is that I think Marvel has done such a good job of carving their own path in the cinematic universe. Mm-hmm. I hope that by doing this, they aren't trying to, I hope they're not doing this as a means of chasing Fox's tail. I hope they do have something interesting of their own right to bring to these characters. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think who's chasing whose tail is certainly debatable, but I think the common consensus is that kind of everybody is chasing Marvel's tail at this point.
Right.
I mean, I looked at the full lineup of comic book movies from this year, to 2020, and it's crazy. I mean, you've got Will, you mentioned a lot of them, but others are like Fantastic Four next year. Then there's movies like that Batman versus Superman one that's coming, the Deadpool movie, more X-Men movies, Suicide Squad, Sinister Six.
Not to mention Star Wars movies every year for the next 6
Oh, yeah.
Star Wars and Star Wars spin-offs, right? There's at least one more Star Trek movie coming. Yeah. They also talked about new Batman and Superman solo movies somewhere in there. So, yeah. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. I mean, the amount of comic book movies we're going to get over the next, 6-7 years.
I am majorly fatigued just talking about it, much less seeing them all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm excited about a lot of these. There are some that don't have me as interested. I think at this point, the DC films that are coming out, and just some of the stuff that I've heard from Christopher Nolan and heard from just all of the casting decisions there. I'm certainly going to go into it with an open mind. I'm definitely excited to see what some of these actors do here, but I'm also afraid that it might be a bit of a clusterfuck, and then that's going to then cascade into their entire DC cinematic universe of just several different films that we'll end up inevitably seeing and inevitably reviewing, and may not be all that good. I hope that's not the case. I really hope that's not the case.
Yeah, for me, I'd rather have quality over quantity if I had to pick one. I mean, I'm sure everybody thinks that every movie that they put out is going to be great, but I just don't think that's the case. I think we're gonna. I'm afraid that I'm already not a fan. I'm just afraid that the whole genre is going to be so watered down, by all of the films, that it's even going to rob from the really good ones.
And we'll see how all that pans out too. It's one of those things where a lot of these films, these film themes go in waves, right? And maybe this is, now that comic books are becoming more in vogue, maybe we'll see less of the toy line reboot movies. You know, we had G.I. Joe and Transformers and fucking Battleship. You know, when it comes to blockbusters, you're always going to draw from something, right?
Right.
And it seems like this is the go-to here. And at least as a comic book fan, I would rather them draw from here than, you know, board games or something like that.
Like Ouija?
Yeah, like Ouija, yeah. And the thing for me is, like, as someone who I've enjoyed, to differing degrees, but I've enjoyed all of the Marvel Cinematic movies that have come out so far. And what I'm not looking forward to is, like, law of averages says that at least one of them's got to suck, right? Like, at some point we're going to have one that's going to bomb and not do well. I mean, they just can't keep up at this pace. Can they? So I'm not looking forward to that first one where it's like, oh god, guys, Thor Ragnarok was terrible, and I hate saying that, or whatever it happens to be.
No. Well, we'll see. I'm anticipating a little burnout with a lot of these movies, especially, you know, as DC enters the fray with all of their films and Star Wars films, and it's just going to be kind of crazy. But I guess we'll see. Maybe it will be a starling, like, golden era of film. Who knows?
A new Hollywood golden age.
A new hope, if you will.
Certainly, I would love to have stock in Disney right now with the Star Wars movies and just the Marvel movies just doing so well, and with Frozen, you know, being a smash hit, and like upcoming Disney films like
Let It Go.
That's perfect. I'm not surprised. I saw that those came out, and I was like, I bet you Brad's gonna get one. Listeners, he has a vinyl pop art of Elsa from.
You did not get to see her in all her glory. Here she is.
And she is quite glorious. She is fabulous with her little snowflake there.
She even has the braid with the little snowflakes in the braid. That is awesome. That's adorable.
Yeah, I know.
Probably the most popular little girl's Halloween costume this year. Elsa.
Anna, no, I'll only hurt you, Anna. I'll only hurt you. You must go away.
Oh, our frozen love does not die.
Conceal, don't feel. Anyway, I'm done, really.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's a big lineup of films, Will. Thank you for kind of going through those with us. I'm not sure, you know, if it's going to be a great thing or just a very tiring thing, but I am excited to see. You know, there was a time when comic book movies were, like, undesirable, right? Like, if you put out a comic book movie, it was pretty much destined to fail. And now maybe the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. But I do think it's cool that we're getting to see a lot of heroes who've never been, you know, sort of in the public eye before in that way. So.
Yeah, it was kind of like you could be Superman and you could be Batman in movies because those are two characters that kind of transcend like superheroes. They're such big pop culture icons that we've had successful movies the mainstream would go, you know, audiences will go and love and see. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Past those two characters, it was a minefield. You'd make a movie and cross your fingers and hope it turned out okay. A lot of times it didn't. So it's certainly, I guess now effects have caught up and world building has caught up, and certainly studio control over films has caught up, and we're certainly in the golden age of comic book movies.
Indeed. All right. Well, if you have a cookie, I think when I say indeed, you're supposed to eat a cookie, right?
I didn't bring my cookies today.
Yeah, I'm cookieless tonight.
I have grapes tonight. I have green seedless table grapes.
No, wow. Look at you. Aren't you fancy?
PLU4498, in case you're curious.
I was very curious. I needed to know what that blue was.
I figured you were. Well, guys, it is not Marvel related, but are you ready to talk some Nightcrawler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as usual, guys, we are going to talk about Nightcrawler, completely spoiler-free, so that if you are not familiar with this movie, or maybe you've seen the trailer, but you're not sure if you should check it out, we'll be happy to give you some advice that might help sway you. And then we'll give fair spoiler warnage Wernage? Is that a word? I don't know. It is now. Before we start revealing the plot. So, all of that said, here we go. Our review of Nightcrawler. Bamf. All right. So, Jim, why don't you kick us off this week? Why don't you give us a bit of a setup for this film, what it is, what you thought of it, and whether you think people should go see it?
Yeah, so we already said that Nightcrawler is not the next X-Men movie. It's also not a movie about a giant worm that comes out of the dense, moist ground at night to prey on unsuspecting co-eds, although that might be a cool movie.
Darn it.
So anyway, no, Nightcrawler is a new movie by a longtime screenwriter but first-time director Dan Gilroy about a guy named Lou Bloom, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal. Or Gyllenhaal? I don't know. Gyllenhaal, I think, right? Whatever. Who, with talent, focused determination, works his way up from being an unemployed petty thief to the successful CEO of his own news production company. So it's just basically a success story, right, guys?
Indeed.
Yep. And no, but while actually 100% accurate about being a success story, it is a disturbingly twisted one. And there's so much more to this movie that makes it a compelling watch. Maybe a better description for this movie would be that it's really a thriller about a desperate but calculatingly clever guy who enters the world of LA crime photojournalism by filming car crashes, fires, shootings, and general aftermath of nighttime violence, basically. These, quote, stringers or night crawlers, as they're called, that we learn in the movie, earn their money by selling the footage that they shoot at these violent scenes to the internet, and in this case, TV news outlets for large sums of cash. And depending on and how much money they make depends on how gruesome and shocking they are to the news station. And so to further his success, the lead character Lou forges a business relationship with an equally desperate local TV news director named Nina, played by Renee Russo. And things begin to go haywire from that point, with basically the lines of morality getting very blurred, to say the least. Things happen, and shocking things happen, and that's where kind of the mayhem really happens. I really like this movie, guys. Even though it made me very uncomfortable in a lot of places, several scenes made me uncomfortable. There's a lot of reasons I like this movie. First of all, I thought this movie looked great. Starting with the opening credit sequence. I don't know if you guys noticed that as much as I did, but it was basically like a video montage of LA street scenes, I guess, or images around LA at nighttime. Incredibly shot, and it's established the urban landscape very well. So in that vein, I thought the cinematography was pretty amazing. The DP for this movie is a guy named Robert Elswit, who is an amazing cinematographer. He did Magnolia. He won the Oscar for There Will Be Blood. He did The Town, Michael Clayton, the last Mission Impossible movie, and the next one that they're going to do. So this guy knows his stuff, and it really showed up in this movie. I thought the movie looked great. Another reason it's a very tense and gripping movie, as I mentioned. It kind of pokes really hard at society's loss of morality, especially in the media. Reminded me a little bit of Drive in the way the movie was set up in its kind of look and tone. It kind of like Drive, but not the same story as Drive. It just had more driving in it, actually, than Drive did, ironically enough. But some really good action sequences, some great tension, amazing acting by Jake Gyllenhaal. There weren't that many major characters in this movie. I would say maybe there were 3 main characters, The rest with maybe a couple of supporting roles that kind of stood out. But I thought Jake Gyllenhaal as Lou Bloom was just amazing. I hope he does get some attention come Oscar time for this role. I thought Rene Russo, who, by the way, happens to be married to the director, Dan Gilroy. I don't know if you guys knew that. But she was also really good. Hadn't seen her in anything quite this good in a long time. So basically, I would say, yes, definitely see this movie. Is it a movie you have to see in theaters? I would say no, but I would say see it as soon as you can because the schedule is filling up with great movies. See this movie now if it's out in the theater. Don't wait for it on DVR, but if you do miss it, you got to go back and see it. Circle back and see it. If not for anything else, just for the performance of Jake Gyllenhaal. But yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah, this is one of those movies where it's like going in, I had seen the trailer a couple times before, and I'm kind of like, I don't know, this looks like it could be interesting. It looks like it could be just kind of way out there, and I wasn't quite sure, how it was going to be. And about 20 minutes into this movie, I'm like, damn, I am really enjoying this, and we really haven't even got into full swing yet. You're absolutely right, Jim. I mean, the cinematography is freaking phenomenal. We spent the weekend with some really good friends from LA, and we were kind of talking after we saw the movie, we kind of wish that we had gone to see it with them, because I'm sure they would have recognized a lot of the different places that were featured in this film. They probably could have told us a lot about some of these locations that would be interesting. But yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal just continues to be, he plays all these different sort of out there parts, right? Like we just saw him in Zodiac. Of course,
Prisoners and Enemy.
Prisoners, yep, absolutely. Brokeback Mountain. I mean, he's been in a lot of different things, playing a lot of different characters, and it continues to amaze me. I mean, there's still a certain Jake Gyllenhaal-esqueness to everything, obviously. But this character that he plays in the film, I don't know. He's just pretty fascinating, especially his ability to learn things quickly and sort of sell them to other people. I think that was really, really neat, the way his character sort of worked. I feel like I'm blathering because, Jim, you already set this up so phenomenally well.
I blathered enough.
No. I just mean I feel like I'm just echoing you at this point. I don't have a lot different to say, except that I think you should go run out and see this right now, especially if you can see it on a big screen in a theater with a great sound system. The sound editing for this movie is phenomenal. It sounds great on a really good system. And of course, don't rob yourself of the great visuals in this film, especially with a lot of the chase scenes. Those are amazing. Oh, yeah. And, phenomenally well done. And I'm sure if you're going to watch this at home on a 60-inch TV or something, it'll look great, but not quite the same experience as seeing it, on a giant screen. So that's where I'm at. Definitely go see it. Will, how about you?
Yeah, I need to echo a lot of what you guys said. This is a fantastic film, one that I think you should absolutely go see. And I would recommend going and seeing it in theaters, not necessarily because it's big booms and big explosions and all the special effects things that we normally talk about when it comes to big screens. More because there's not a lot of films out there like this one. When it comes to big budget blockbusters, you can kind of talk about them in a certain, you can categorize them pretty easily. And the same with romantic comedies or indie dramas or what have you. But this film, Nightcrawler, very much exists in a realm all its own. In a lot of ways, it's a dark comedy. In that there are some really humorous elements built around something that's extremely warped and extremely unnervingly creepy. One of the things that I enjoyed so much about this was it talks about the concept of, in the film they're called coyotes, which are the guys who are going around at the end of the night, filming stuff, and the aggressive freelance cameramen selling off their footage to the different news crews, who then air it based on the if it bleeds, it leads mentality. And I always think about the news in terms of well, yeah, that's a lot of graphic footage, but I never think about how they get that graphic footage. It's just one of those things that you take for granted that, yeah, someone's there with a camera. So it exposed me to certainly a concept that I was maybe I really didn't have a good grasp on, like how all of that happened. One of the interesting things about Dan Gilroy, and I was fortunate with my screening, I had a QA with Dan Gilroy shortly after, so I got to hear.
Was this at Fantastic Festival?
This was at Fantastic Fest. This was the red carpet gala for the closing night. So he got to talk a little bit about it and some of the different decisions. And one of the things that interested me the most, both about the film and kind of his logic behind it, was I loved that this film has a lot of social commentary about sensationalism and the LA news scene and things along those lines. You know, how the news, really, it puts screaming women and bleeding things and murder and rape as the headliners, because that's what gets butts glued to seats. But if you'll notice, he presents all of this stuff without being deep or cutting in his commentary. He presents the material, and certainly we're able to make our own decisions on these things. And ultimately, I think most people are kind of like, yeah, this is kind of creepy, or this is unnerving, or this isn't good the way this works out. But you don't have any characters that are like chastising or having long speeches about like, well, this is terrible because of all of these things. He presents this dark world and then takes a step back and says, I just put this up on screen. It's up to you to interpret it.
I'm just going to leave this here.
I'm just going to leave this here. And going to Jake Gyllenhaal, he is, and I've said it before on this show, I think he's one of those guys who, right now, he's one of my absolute favorite people in Hollywood. You put him in a movie, I'm going to go watch it. He was amazing in this. And we might just see some Oscar recognition.
Prince of Persia, that kind of stuff.
Well, for me, this is the second film from him this year. He also was in Enemy earlier this year, which is one of my top 5 films of the year. He was amazing in that. Comes right off of Prisoners in the last fall. He's really on a hot streak right now. But in terms of recognition for awards, not only is his performance really good, not only does he take a lot with a character who's given absolutely zero backstory. And everything is on screen and everything's set very much in the now, which is both a credit to him and to Gilroy. But, and this is probably unfair, but he also lost 20 pounds for this part. And while necessarily like gaining and losing weight isn't acting, it's body transformation. The Academy loves that sort of thing. So not only is this a good performance, but coupled with the 20-pound weight loss and just how uncomfortably thin he looked, I would not be surprised if he got nominated. My only fear is that this is such a different movie than we're kind of used to seeing. I don't know that it necessarily falls in the the Oscar bait category, and it's possible he may get kind of barely nudged out for that reason alone. But that's kind of my long ramble. You should absolutely go see this movie. It has a lot of great themes. Fantastic acting. You're absolutely right about the visuals and the sound. There's so much that works in this movie. If you have a chance to see it this week, go do so. This film definitely deserves it.
Yeah, Will, you mentioned that this movie touches on, how the media, sensationalizes the gruesomeness and the shock value, and that's what it's all about. The other dimension that this movie played to me, did you guys have the same feeling that I did? I don't know if you guys have worked. I know, Brad, you have. Will, I don't know if you've worked for like a corporation that where when he was talking to, especially to his understudy Rick, and when he's talking to the news station people, I had so much of like a flashback. Like he's using corporate speak. This puts us on he's running to a crime scene where people are getting shot, and he's running with the camera trying to get the thing, and he's talking to this guy about this is how we position ourselves for growth, and blah 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 blah, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so amazing the way to me it was almost as much a commentary on the immorality of large corporations and how corporations treat people as it was of the media and how the media manipulates people as well. I mean, if you, it just struck me that way, and it was, it was amazing. I thought the writing here was really good. Of course, the director, as I mentioned, he's a first-time director, but he's done a lot of screenwriting, and I think it shows in this movie.
Yeah. This Louis Bloom character is a coldly ambitious guy, right? Like, he is a character who knows what he wants out of life, and he goes and gets it. And we'll talk about what those things are in spoilers, but, even in the trailers, we see him, like, in an interview, like, talking to some guy using, like those phrases that you hear all of the time in corporate speak or in interviews,
or performance reviews.
Or performance reviews, I bring team synergy, things like that, words that are only used in corporate speak. This is a guy that kind of knows the language, knows when and how to use it, and uses it to prop himself up and propel him forward.
He's strangely likable in how he does that. It's well, for me at least. He's strangely likable, especially because, like, we're talking about his corporate speak. Yeah, there's an element to that, but to me, it's almost more like self-help coach.
Yep.
Yeah,
that too.
It really comes across as, like, especially, I mean, we'll talk more in spoilers, but there are certain points where he's talking to Rick or to Nina, where he's like, statistics say that da 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 da, and really what this translates into is we have to really, empower ourselves to da da da. It's encouraging. It's kind of like a little uplifting, and you see people, like, buying into this self-help shtick, and it just is such a commentary on how lemming-like we all are sometimes, how ready we are to just follow someone who sounds like they know what they're talking about, even when they may be leading us to ruin. Jim, you're shaking your head.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. There was a lot of that, like, Tony Robbins-ish kind of, self-help, motivational kind of speaking in the way he came across. And he mentioned it, I think, a little bit in the movie, that he's watched a lot of videos or he's read a lot of internet or something like that. So you get the feeling that this guy is not necessarily very intelligent, but he's very well read and very well studied. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, he doesn't seem to have. He certainly has no. Let me see. How can I say? The part that unnerved me was that it's like he has no conscience for what he's. I don't think he has any. He's never shown any conscience in the movie from the time he started to the end, and he's almost like, give a kid a real gun, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And set him loose. Like, they have no sense of self-control or conscience, and that made me very, very nervous and anxious to see a character with that wield that much apparent power, and nobody called him on his shit,
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy.
You could make the argument that, this is a sociopath, and I mean that from the standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is, there's the type of person who has empathy for those around them, and there's the type of people that don't. This is the type of character who, he knows the right things to say. He's definitely a self-made man. He's heard these things, and he knows how to apply them, and he knows how to motivate people. But he's very much an ends justify the means type guy. And that certainly, builds on the what made this film creepy to me. And that's why it's so dark. It's hard to. This isn't a character that was presented for us to like or to dislike, and certainly I think we can walk away from it both liking and disliking him, because he is charming, he's interesting, he's funny, but he's also cold, and he's uncomfortable, and he's alien. And so it's one of those things, and I love that the direction and the acting kind of coincided here to make this character that was totally unique and totally put out there without any baggage. This is, again, kind of like a here audience, what you see is what you get, make what you will of this character.
Yeah. It's almost like, Will, you mentioned alien. It's almost like he's an alien who landed on Earth, picked up a Tony Robbins book on how to make $1 million and be successful, and just was let loose on society. That's kind of what
Oh my gosh!
It's like Under the Skin, but with Jake Gyllenhaal. So we'll call it Under the Grin.
Yeah.
Nice. Very good. Very good, Brad.
So we've come perilously close to violating our no spoiler rule. I think it's hard to discuss this movie without sort of going there. Are you guys ready to make that transition?
I think so.
I think so. Yep.
I think so too. So that said, those of you who are watching us live, we see you hanging out. Please feel free to step away for 15 minutes or so if you've not yet seen the film and don't want to be spoiled. Those who are listening, on audio delay, so Thursday when this comes out, feel free to feel free to refer to our handy show notes for the lovingly crafted
Feel
time
free to
minute.
give a handy.
Yeah, feel free to give a loving handy to the person next to you. Yeah.
And you can skip ahead as needed. But spoilers are officially fair game. One thing that I want to talk about to launch this conversation, we were sort of mentioning this sociopath thing. It really surprised me how, the Lou Bloom character just walks up to an active accident scene or a crime scene and pulls a body out from under a car to stage it for proper lighting and drama on camera, or goes into this house where this murder has just happened. I mean, he's so brazen and detached from what's going on, and that detachment is the hallmark of total psychopathy. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I saw an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal, and he said that, and Will, you touched on this too. Maybe you heard it from Gilroy, is that he modeled his character after an actual coyote. He starved himself to make himself hungry and lean, and kind of a creature of the night. And if you watch his character as he's doing his stuff on the screen, you can actually see that's how an animal would kind of when he's going into houses and sneaking in with his camera around the houses. It's almost like he is a coyote, sneaking around the bushes looking for prey. I mean, it's kind of crazy, and it's an amazing. It's another dimension to the performance. But definitely he is. I mean, he's not kind of a psychopath. He's definitely. I'm sorry. I mean, he's a sociopath.
Sociopath.
Period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and another interesting thing about him is I guess they had wanted him to originally have his hair cut really short and look very corporate and I'm a young up-and-comer, and I guess that's something that Gyllenhaal pushed back on and said, actually, I kind of see him with this kind of slightly longer, greasier hair. And
he puts it up in the man bun.
Yeah, and Gilroy, to his credit, said, "Okay, we'll give it a try." And sure enough, it worked well. I thought it really made. He has this very lean, this predatory, this emaciated, this I am a creature of the night, almost vampiric look, with this kind of greasy hair. He looks like a creature of the night, but he acts like a guy who would work very well in a, just kind of the office across the street type thing. It made for a very, very compelling character, especially as he gets into some of the more reprehensible things, which I think now that we're in spoilers, we can start talking about. This is a character who he starts off by following these different car crashes and filming them and selling the footage. And then you start seeing him tampering with things, moving something slightly. I'll get a better shot if I do this. He learns how to work these cameras. He learns what a good camera angle looks like. And he knows what people would want to see on their evening news. And he starts manipulating these scenes. And things really come to a head with the when he arrives on the scene of the the home invasion, where he's there before the police are, and he films the bleeding and dying people, and the fleeing suspects again before cops even arrive on the scene. That scene. There's other stuff in this film that's also creepy and uncomfortable later on, but that was the scene that really got underneath my skin. I put myself in the seat of the victims, right? Can you imagine obviously the worst event that could happen to you in your life, something like that happens, you and your family murdered or injured, those types of things, and then just someone very coldly coming in, you're not calling for help and just filming you. I got shivers. It was hard to watch in an interesting way.
It was almost like, I don't know, this movie had kind of 1 foot in reality and 1 foot kind of in an alternate universe a little bit, where where he could kind of get away with this stuff pretty easily. I mean, some people might call this film on there's no way that the cops would have let him loose. They would have subpoenaed all of his footage and all of his files and his computers and ransacked his apartment. I mean, especially if at one point in the movie a police officer is shot and injured in one of the scenes that he actually kind of orchestrates to get film, and that was another very uncomfortable scene. You got these two cold-blooded killers who had done a home invasion murder before, and now they're in a restaurant, and cops are being called in, and he knows what's going to go down, and he's set up to shoot it and ultimately sell that. But I don't know. It just seemed like this was not. It's very interesting the way the movie kind of set up this kind of real but unreal environment for this character, where you knew that there were things that happened that probably would not necessarily be able to happen in real life. Like, I don't know if he'd be able to get in there and move bodies and do all kinds of stuff, supposedly out of the sight of the police, but it just kind of stretched my credibility a little bit. But I didn't say, oh, this is bullshit, and it didn't take me out of the movie. It heightened the movie. They knew how to get up to that line and push that line for me.
And part of that's because they didn't just go diving over that line. All throughout this film, wherever that line is, he gets to it, and then he kind of puts his toe over it and becomes a little bit more assertive, a little bit more risky, a little bit more aggressive in what he does. So it's not like some guy just kind of in the first scene just like going batshit crazy. Every scene he kind of builds on this risk-taking and kind of taking things further and further. So it's a cumulative effect. Like, yeah, I mean, a lot of the things he gets away with are crazy to think about that someone could get away with these. Kind of in the real world, it's a hard pill to swallow, but again, I think the film builds it up in such a way, and it creates this world that's kind of got this like magic of the night, so to speak. Like it's a thriving evening, thriving nighttime world. So you kind of get that people can get away with a little bit of this stuff in this world.
Yeah. It really makes me wonder what sort of the real world translation of this whole Nightcrawler thing really is. Like, do you think a lot of people really show up and like film active like crime scenes and accidents? I mean, I know we get footage of some of these things on the news sometimes, but I've never seen a news broadcast where they show like this kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Have you ever seen anything like even something as simple as like an accident and someone being hauled into an ambulance where their face is all like bloody and their throat is all gashed? Have you seen that on the news before?
You see damn close to it on the news, especially with car wrecks. You'll see, like, at least the news I've seen, like, you will see maybe not necessarily the injured person themselves, but you'll see the mangled wreck of the car. And honestly, when do they show that? Not when it's a fender bender, but when it's like a car wreck where the car was just torn apart and crumbled. You'll see a shot where it'll kind of go past where there's like a blood stain on the road or something like that. You'll see someone being loaded into the back of the ambulance. So I think the difference between this world and our world is that our world does have kind of a threshold on what will allow, and in this one that envelope is getting pushed slowly and slowly and slowly. So in some ways this is kind of a commentary on not only like where we're at, but honestly how close we are to being in Nightcrawler's world. We're really just like one extra close up away from like being over that line.
Well, nowadays, with everybody in their cell phone cameras, I would imagine the world of the Stringer or the Nightcrawler is changing. Like, it must be harder for them to get scoops on I mean, because if Joe Blow can be the next car behind the accident scene and film everything with his camera and offer it to the news station for $1,000, whereas the Nightcrawler guy would typically sell something like that for $5,000 or $10,000. You got to figure the business must be changing for them.
Well, to be fair though, and we see a lot of this with the Lou Bloom character, there's a lot of staging that goes into those videos. It's not just, oh hey, here's some guy being loaded into an ambulance, right? It's it's the tracking of the shots. It's the motion setup as you like come around the corner of the hulk of the car, and then you see the body and the smoke. And I mean, there's almost an art form to it that some guy that's just like whipping out his cell phone isn't necessarily gonna, you know what I mean, be able to replicate. And
No, but what I'm saying is that, like, if an accident happens, a guy with the cell phone is going to be more likely to catch the actual incident. You know what I mean? The moment of horror in a car crash when a car flips over and some poor person, you know, gets ejected from the car, he may catch that on his dash cam or on his cell phone, whereas the Nightcrawler who comes in 3 minutes later is only going to be able to get, you know, the people laying on the ground and the people being loaded into the ambulance. So, and you got to figure, if you're in the news, which clip are you going to go for? You know what I mean?
Well, you're also probably going to go. Well, there's different things that you'd probably consider, right? Like, one, like kind of what the content of the footage itself is, but also the quality of the footage becomes an issue, right? Because this is what you're going to lead off on the news. So the conversation that we're having now versus the conversation that we have in 2 years or in 5 years as the next round of smartphones and the next round of smartphones, and they get better and better and better video quality, I think that blurs those lines a lot. But I would also say that things like, you know, a shaky cell phone cam works really well if you're filming like a storm or something like that. Like, you know, that's a lot of what the storm footage or tornadoes. Maybe not as much like, you know, kind of filming like what's going on with like a law enforcement officer at a car crash scene. At least, again, right now, but I think that you definitely make a valid point that as technology improves and get better and better, it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the news and how it impacts the amount of footage and the quality of footage. I mean, we right now live in an age that right now we are part of like the YouTube generation, where amateurish footage or amateurish lighting or things like that are more acceptable to us than they used to be before. You know, once upon a time we would, you know, if you'd watch a commercial and unless it was like just the worst local commercial possible, you would scoff at it if it didn't look great. But now someone can, you know, I don't know, 3 random guys can get on a Google Hangouts and record a discussion about a movie, and, you know, it's fine. You know, you don't have to have professional lighting and professional camera equipment. You know, it's just based on the quality of the content itself. So this is all part of the conversation, and what I love so much about it is that it does invoke this conversation. It does make us think, well, like, where are we at right now? Where are things going? Why are they going there? Is it okay that they're going there? And there's no clean, easy answer.
And I find myself really sort of also interested in the legality of filming police officers and rescue workers. I mean, you know, at several points in the movie, the police are like, "Get the fuck back!" You know, turn their camera off, whatever. But I mean, what? Do you guys know the legality? Are you able to film a police officer or a paramedic?
It's something that the movie didn't dabble in, because I think it probably would have weighed down the story too much with superfluous stuff. But yeah, it is interesting, and I'm sure the guys who do that for a living probably know where the legal line is and what they can do and what they can't. Whereas Joe Blow with his camera probably does not know what he can film and what he can't film. I guess my point was just saying that if I'm a news person and I'm looking for footage of, let's say, a car accident, I only have money to spend on one clip, I would buy the shaky, fuzzy image of the actual, let's say, the shooting. I would buy the shaky, fuzzy image or a video of the actual shooting than a well-composed one of a guy laying on the ground already shot. Does that make sense?
Sure, but you also have to assume that the one, and if you think about it, we do get to see that, right? Like, think about, you know, the calls for footage whenever something happens with, like, you know, the different cases. Like, you know, it happened recently in St. Louis and things like that. You got to see a lot more of this, like, cell phone footage, usually not of the event itself, but like in the immediate seconds thereafter. You do get to see those, usually more picked up by the 24-hour news stations, about certain really, really big events as people are trying to triangulate what happens. But you also have to think in context of just the random car crash for the 10 o'clock news. I think they want something that looks sharp and is fitting with their and it is fitting with like kind of what they would want for like a really cool, like, you know, at 6 o'clock you get like the little preview, and then the 10 o'clock you get the actual footage. I think I think quality does play a part in there. In terms of the legality, it varies a lot state to state, but in a lot of states you can film police officers without any problem, as long as it's like open and not like you know, you're not filming them like surreptitiously or anything like that. And I would imagine, and again, I'm a little bit speaking out of my ass here because I don't know how that would necessarily apply to ambulances, but I would imagine that a lot of that would cross over as well. Like there's certain things that you can as just a citizen film things. Now, is it ethically right to do so? That's a different story.
The way the movie handled it was they had the guy there, if you remember, in the studio, and it was his job to go get the family's okay and the releases and all that stuff to run that interference, and that was kind of compartmentalized in that one character. Like, hey, you, it was the Madman guy, right? He's like, hey, you, go take care of that. Go contact the family and shut the fuck up, you know? That's the way it was handled in the movie. But the thing I like about the movie is it showed that our character was a sociopath and he had his issues. But this movie showed that kind of we live in a society that creates people like him. You know what I mean? And also not just creates him, but rewards him for what we would typically call, you know, unacceptable behavior. Him going in and framing this stuff and tampering with crime scenes and all kinds of stuff, and it just like it represents like the ugly side of our curiosity and perversions, right? We can't turn away from a car wreck, you know, as bad as we think it's going to be. There's something hardwired in us that we're always gonna look. What we think about it is a different story, but I think we're wired with curiosity to see it, and I like the way that the movie kind of puts that in the audience's sight and kind of lets them think about it and lets it sink in.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about us as viewers. Think about anyone that's listening to this episode. Think about yourself. We may think like, oh man, what a world that we live in. It's crazy that people like this can exist. But then, which news channel are you going to tune into? If the news is talking about like the 20-car pileup on the street near you, or if the news said something like just like if they led with like their common interest story or something like that, you know, their public interest story, you know, we can very easily say that this is reprehensible. It kind of is, right? But still, as human beings,
we still tune in.
We still do it, right? Like, I mean, if even us having this conversation, if the news says you won't believe the terrifying, scary, awful thing that happened, we're probably going to go like, yeah, I actually kind of want to know what that terrifying, scary, awful thing is. I mean, we're going to tune in. That's just the weird part about being a human.
Well, think of it even in terms of like the recent Ebola scare, right? Like headline baiting is absolutely crazy. Like there was one case in New York, and USA Today's headline that day was, you know, Ebola, you know, hits New York or whatever. And it makes it sound like it's an epidemic. There's a big picture of an explosion from a different story, but it's very obviously crafted to get people like sensationalized and interested, and you know what I mean? Even though it was like one case, maybe. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I think we have a penchant for doing that anyway. But if you're able to get some crazy son of a bitch sociopath who's able to get in here and get this footage and these shots, I mean, I totally buy that is something that you know, they would put on television, especially because they're a news station that's been struggling in ratings, right? They want to bring people
that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of realism, I mean, especially L.A. I mean, it's fucking L.A. That wouldn't surprise me at all. You know, I could totally see something like this happening. But, yeah, this is a great film. I'm sure there's a ton more we could talk about. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we move into plugs?
Yeah, I want to talk about that car. That car was fucking awesome. I looked it up. It's a red Dodge Challenger SRT8 392, which is the engine. So it is pretty fucking amazing. And I thought, I mean, this movie had some amazing car sequences in it. I mean, there's one big chase scene which is pretty fucking awesome, but then just riding around on the streets of LA, because he would be rushing to get to these accident scenes or whatever, darting through traffic and whatnot, and I thought, I mean, those scenes were all thrilling. They were well choreographed and well shot. I also want to say that I liked the guy who played Rick. Riz Ahmed was his name. Yeah, I don't recall seeing him in other movies, but I think he's been in a movie or two. But I did like his character a lot. He was kind of the sane one, I guess, in the whole movie. I did kind of see the end for him coming a little bit earlier. I kind of thought that something was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen, but I figured something was going to happen at the end. It was a little bit telegraphed, I think. In that last, I'll just call it the Chinese restaurant scene, which was really great. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I like this movie. I'd see it again if I had time. I think people should see it.
Yep,
totally agree. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's move on to our plugs then. Let's see. You know what? I haven't gone first for anything, so I'm going to go first. I'm changing up the agenda order, Will.
Oh, no. Go for it.
I'm calling an audible because Jim went first for the movie, and I don't want to make him go first twice in a row. So, let's see. For me, I'm going to plug the new trailer for the new Minions movie. I know that you had a chance to see this, Jim. Will, I think you said you saw it too, right?
I did, yeah.
So, saw it today for the first time. Didn't even know it was out until I just saw a friend had posted on Facebook. And, man, I am just really, really looking forward to this movie. I resisted seeing Despicable Me for years because I thought it looked stupid. I thought the Minions looked like the dumbest thing on the face of the planet. But then I finally saw it, and I fell in love with the Minions. I even have one on my desk.
Banana?
He talks. Hold on. Maybe. Somehow. Anyway. All my wonderful toys. Anyway, so when I heard that they were going to do a Minions-specific movie, I'm like, the Minions are great as kind of an ancillary, fun type thing. I don't quite know how this is going to go as a film itself, but having seen the trailer now, I don't know. I'm pretty interested. I mean, it's a trailer, so I don't think spoilers are really much of an issue. I'm digging the 60s vibe that we're getting. The Minions are going to be in New York City in the late 60s. I'm looking forward to seeing how all that sort of goes down. I thought the evolution of the Minions, like the different big bads they've sort of hooked up with in years past, was really funny. The whole like Dracula bit like totally had me like laughing out loud. And I can't remember the last trailer that had me laughing that hard. So I'm really, really excited for this movie. I don't know. How about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting upstairs. I hadn't seen it yet, getting ready for the show, and I hear Brad downstairs all of a sudden let out this huge belly laugh, and I'm like, who the hell is down there, like, telling him funny shit, you know? And, I don't know, Brad. You usually don't go for the kind of silly comedy movies, so
I don't.
These Minion things must really hit a chord with you. I saw the trailer too. I think it looks fine. My only concern is that in the Despicable Me movies, the Minions were, certainly a good part of that movie, but a movie really wasn't necessarily about the Minions. So a whole movie of Minions, we'll have to see how that goes. If it's because as we've learned in other properties, too much of a good thing can turn out not so great. But we'll see. I mean, the trailer looks funny. I did like the fact, at least at the end of the trailer, they indicated that they came to the U.S. in like 1968. So I want to see how they set up that how they execute that setting of 1968 in New York or wherever they go. Because that's a time that I like to see in movies, the 60s. I don't know if they'll stay in the 60s or they'll just bring them through time from now, all the way up. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting because I loved the first Despicable Me movie because it focused on this adoptive family, and I thought that it was just very heartwarming the way these characters found each other. And the second film I actually didn't like as much because it focused way more on the Minions and not as much on that relationship. And when they announced then that there was going to be a Minions movie, I was thinking like, this is jump the shark. I don't really care to see it. The Minions were my least favorite part of the Despicable Me movies. But having watched the trailer, it looks funny, it looks interesting, so it may have, maybe I'll be able to turn my opinion around on them having seen this. The trailer looks very promising.
All right. Well, that's my plug. What do you have, Jim?
Oh, I have a plug for it's just really it's a YouTube channel that I've come to really appreciate. For those people who are fans of movies and want to hear more from the directors or the actors that are in certain movies, it's a YouTube channel called DP/30 or DP30. It's basically it's 30-minute interviews with directors, actors, writers of movies, and it offers. I mean, the interviewer is pretty good, and it offers great insight, into the movies, into what the actors, what the directors are thinking, what the writers wanted to portray in the stories. I just, there's some good ones out there. I got the Dan Gilroy one today and watched that, and it was very, very interesting how he talks about the movie. He talks about his actors, how the story came together, how much Jake Gyllenhaal had input into the story. And into the character specifically of Lou Bloom. I've seen the DP30 for Boyhood with Richard Linklater and the whole cast of Boyhood. Actually, there's several of these 30-minute interviews with the different cast members, including Patricia Arquette, Ethan Hawke, and the kids that were in the movie. So, check it out. It's DP/30 on YouTube. It's some pretty interesting stuff out there, and they're always coming out with new stuff as movies are released. I know they've got something out there with Christopher Nolan right now on Interstellar, Matthew McConaughey stuff. So, and I haven't even, I typically won't watch it until I've seen the movie because sometimes there are spoilers in there, so beware of that. But check it out. For the movies you've seen, you kind of like, you want to know a little bit more about it, check out DP30.
Awesome. How about you, Will?
My plug is for a film that is in limited release right now. It actually hit theaters on October 31st. And it's Horns, and it's one that we've mentioned on the show before. I think I mentioned it briefly in the Fantastic Fest recap a few episodes back. But this is an Alexander Aja film starring Daniel Radcliffe and Juno Temple about a guy who is after his girlfriend gets murdered, he's the town pariah. Everyone thinks he did it, and he wakes up one day and there's these weird horns on his head. It's a very interesting movie. It's very it's good. I enjoy it quite a bit, and there's definitely some really weird places this film goes. Certainly the type that I can't talk about. But the reason I bring it up, not only is it on limited release right now, it's also available right now. It's one of those ones that it went up on Amazon to rent, Amazon Instant Video, for $6.99. It's available. You can watch it from your television right now without having to go to the theater. So if Horns doesn't look like it's going to play in an area near you, you don't have to wait for a DVD release down the line. Just go to Amazon, rent it right now. Definitely worth the time and the money for it. I enjoyed the film, and I think you will too.
Awesome. All right. Well, guys, thank you for devoting an hour and a half of your time. Always love getting together with you two, even if it's just virtually, to discuss film and geek out over movie stuff. Thank you as well to those who have been watching live. We did have a comment come in, by the way, from our good friend Kevin Jackson here in Tucson. And he just was kind of referring back to the Marvel discussion. He says, "There's never been a forecast of this many comic-related films. It feels a bit like front-loading to me, just to generate interest and hype on the part of Marvel and somewhat DC. And surely many of these projects will not all be made and are in part dependent upon the box office success of the ones that are in production." Interesting. If some of these films bomb, I wonder if that would impact like a Black Panther or Inhumans actually, getting made.
It's happened already, actually. Sony with the Spider-Man movies, around the time that Spider-Man 2 or Amazing Spider-Man 2 was about to come out, they had this full lineup of Spider-Man movies, and they already had Sinister Six, and they had a female-led Spider-Man movie, but they had like 2 other Spider-Man movies, a Venom movie, and they've cut a few of those out and pushed the next Spider-Man out to 2018 because Spider-Man 2 did not do as well in the box offices as they liked to. So we already have one example where they've forecasted all of these films. The box office didn't support it, and they pulled back. Marvel, at least, has been making money hand over fist. Guardians of the Galaxy now being, like, I think the second most profitable movie of the year, or something like that. And so we'll see what it looks like if and when they don't make money on a movie. And we'll also have to see how DC does, because they've got a very aggressive lineup as well, and maybe a little bit more untested and untrue on their side. So I'm very curious to see how the next few years shake out.
It'll be very interesting if it ever gets to a point where one of these Marvel comic book movies does not make money, and they do end up announcing, cancellations of these movies that they've. Usually, when they announce the date and the movie, it might move somewhat, date-wise, but typically a cancellation is a huge deal.
Right.
Yeah. So, if they start canceling any movies because of non-performance of some of the movies, then that is a big indicator of problems.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Hasn't happened to Marvel yet, but it's happened to other properties.
It has. We'll have to see what Marvel would do in there. I think that they're probably not in any danger of that happening anytime soon. But again, you never know how the market's going to shift.
That's so true. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, that wraps us up for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next week. Gosh, we have a lot to trying to decide what we're going to talk.
Interstellar.
There's Interstellar. There's Big Hero 6 is also out this weekend.
Right.
We don't know yet what we're going to do, but we'll get back to you when we do. Have a good night, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.